I've had a very unusual life. I was asked a question about how to deal with some situation in a corporate setting, and I had to say, honestly, I have no idea, because as soon as I basically was old enough to drive a car and walk on my own, which was a little more than 16, I just came to the spiritual life and I never looked back. And Swami Kriyananda, Yogananda's direct disciple, was active and available, and I just saw him for the first time in 1969, and now I easily speak of reincarnation in past lives because that is the only possible explanation. He walked into a room that was not much bigger than this. I was with people who wanted to see him, but not that much. So they put us in the I was with them, we went to the last row so we could be safe from the Swami's influence. So I saw him walk in. He was in his early 40s, stalwart and strong, and he hadn't even spoken. And for the first time in my life, I saw an example of what it meant to be a human being that I wanted to emulate. I saw someone who had something that I had been looking for all my life. Later, I found out it was wisdom, it was joy, kindness, many, many adjectives I can put on it. But from that first sight to this moment, it's just been, I followed that pole star. And from the moment I really became connected to Swamiji, which was not much longer after that, I felt that I had a front row seat on history. Swamiji was always impressive, but he was not known at that point. And many of his accomplishments came in the following years. But I knew enough to know that this was a life that really was going to be different and really mattered, his life. And I was there to learn and then to pass it on. And right from the beginning, he put me in a position where I was telling everyone else what he told me, basically. Not that he was instructing me, but not that he was giving me messages, but I was just learning what life is about and how to be happy and what makes us miserable and how to avoid being miserable. And early on, he said to me that he wanted me to write about his life. Later, he sometimes called me his biographer, which was a bigger title than I really wanted to take. And by now, many people who know him have written. So I started carrying a notebook and a pen, and which I did for the following decades, whenever I was with him, and just wrote down. And this rather heavy book is the result of that, and another couple of other things I've written. But everything that I'm going to share with you is not mine. It's become mine in the sense that when you really live something, even if it was given to you from someone else's wisdom, unless and until we conduct the proper experiment. Yogananda spoke of the science of religion. And there were many reasons why he used that phrase, but the main reason was, in science, you get a theory that you think is a good one, and then you conduct the experiment. And the conclusion that you draw is not just because you like the theory and hope it's true. It's because you've conducted the experiment and you've proven it to your satisfaction that this is so. So I saw in Swami Kriyananda a possibility for life, his destiny, his purpose was to share what he'd learned from Yogananda. And when my purpose is to share what I learned from him, for one very simple reason. This is a hard world to live in, and is not getting easier. And all of us are here for a purpose, and that purpose is to understand why we're here. It's kind of a circle, isn't it? But we're to understand why we're here and what success really looks like and what it really feels like. And there's a lot to share. Swami Kriyananda left his body in April of 2013. In the year previous, 2012, we made a film about Ananda, which we called Finding Happiness. We came up with that great title at the same time that about 6 other filmmakers came up with a title almost exactly the same. Thoughts are universal. And my friend Shivani from Ananda Sisi, an American, but she's been in Europe for decades now, she was the executive producer and put the whole thing together. And she got some people from the movie industry in Los Angeles to help us. So we were working with a professional crew and we did a quasi-documentary. We had a little bit of a plot line of a journalist who came to investigate this community, and that was fiction, but everybody she met and everything she did was real, including some marvelous footage of Swami Kriyananda in the last year of his life. I got sucked into it. They gave me some official title on the credits, but basically we were filming it like a drama, not like a documentary, so it cost us, $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000 an hour. So we just couldn't let people babble on and hope they said the right thing. So I had to vet all the people in advance and figure it out. And we did what we do, including singing like that. Now, I happen to be dressed in a rather conservative blue at the moment, but in the Ananda context, we often wear very bright colors. If you notice this room, no one is wearing bright colors. A few of you, thank you. In my own community, where I often stand in front of the crowd, black just became so common that one Sunday I became just quite upset. I dress carefully for you, and you all just come in black week after week after week. So I got them, they started just being nicer to me. So one of the scenes of the movie is our choir, and they're all dressed in very bright colors. And we, the men had certain shirts, the women had little dresses, and we sang songs like "The Secret of Laughter," like this. And then time passed, and we came to the point where you do something called the director's cut, and you show it to the focus groups, and you get their feedback to see if there's any way you can save it, if it's a bomb, or if you know that you've really got something. As it happened, that happened in Los Angeles, and of our entire Ananda team on the movie, I was the only one, for some reason, who was free to go to Los Angeles and go through this whole thing. So mostly, of course, they'd been in our world filming, and they were very professional and respectful, and they seemed to enjoy it. They liked Swami Kriyananda. The whole crowd made a connection. So we're there after the focus group program, and we're all having coffee together, and I'm in Hollywood with all these Hollywood types. They're all very trendy in the way they're dressed, wearing hundreds of dollars worth of clothes just to have coffee in the morning. And then they sort of realized that I was alone, that nobody in the cult was supervising me. Nobody was watching. And they sort of kind of like sidled up and said, now you can really tell us. And referring specifically to the choir and the music, one of them said, "Do you all really do that?" And I said, "You mean wear bright happy songs? I said, yeah, every day. And, you know, they were experienced people and they were polite. But I could see it just didn't compute. You know, they just couldn't figure out how bright and in many cases highly educated people who had lots of options in life ended up. When we had so much potential. Reminded me of my parents when all of this started, you know. A long time ago. I'm a child of the 60s in California, so you can fill in the rest of it. Yeah, we were all like that. Several of the men who came to our community expected to go to jail for burning their draft cards, which was a big deal in the Vietnam War. One man in particular came because he wanted to learn to meditate because he thought he was going to end up in prison. I mean, we were a feisty bunch. Swami had his hands full sufficiently to say that. But the fact of the matter is, you know, life is a whole different story than the culture we're living in right now. You know, it's like we have grown used to the environment that we have. But this is, with all due respect, and I don't just mean Vienna, because I've traveled in a lot of places, this is what a collapsing civilization looks like. You know, where it's just, even the fundamentals of life are getting very confused. And the positive good news is that we are moving upward. Consciousness is rising at the same time that many things are disintegrating. And what we really have to understand is very simple questions, such as, why was I born? And what really brings me happiness? What really causes suffering? And how do I find a way to live that is consistent with what my inner intuition is really crying for, you know? And the chaotic times that we live in when essentially all conventions are just falling apart. Whatever values you come to, you will come to from your own actual experience, because you can choose to be anything you want right now. And actually, this is the good news, that right now we are very much on our own to sort through the politics and the entertainment industry and the institutional religion versus personal spirituality. And it's a very, very insecure age to live in, because nothing holds. You know, things that used to last a lifetime just break apart, and we seem to live multiple incarnations in one. You know, many of us can look back and see, wow, I thought that was going to last longer than it did. I'm surprised to find myself here, all of those things. But that begins to tune us in to the question of what's underneath all of this. What is the real story? And fortunately, in every age and at every time, there arises out of the field of ordinary humanity great saints and masters who just see it very differently than we do. And scientists and inventors who, instead of seeing the world through the senses with all of this expectation, they just have a revelation of a different reality. And they don't really contradict those who came before them, but they bring the same message in a context that makes sense to us now. I'm a disciple, of course, of this line of masters described in Autobiography of a Yogi. I was actually born into a Jewish family, although we were not a religious family, but it's part of the heritage I carry. So I came to an understanding of Jesus only after I had been deeply immersed in self-realization. But what we all come to see is that every one of these masters tells us the same thing. And they describe to us that the drama of this world appears to be the big events. But the big events are really literally like a painted backdrop for a different drama. And that different drama is the individual soul's gradual, increasing awareness of our own nature and the implications of that understanding. Okay? So we have to understand several other metaphysical facts for that to work. Primarily, we have to think in terms of many lifetimes. Because if we only think from birth to death, there's just not enough time. And we can, move the dial a little bit, but we can't start from total delusion to total freedom in 60 or 80 or 105 years. We have too much to learn. But if we begin to understand that the body I'm living in is not the first body I've had, and the story that I'm enjoying, this is one chapter in this really wonderful drama. And there are many words that we can use that help us to understand, but the most powerful one is simply the word increasing and expanding our awareness. If you think even from a baby, what constitutes progress in human life? And if you really think about it, it's always increasing awareness. Little children learn language. They learn what behaviors work. If I pick up my toy truck and I bash my little friends in the head with it, they won't want to play with me anymore. It seems like a good idea at the time, but it does not bring the result that we want. And so a child becomes aware, and we grow into so-called adulthood, and in a much more sophisticated, elegant way, we still pick up our little toy trucks and bash people in the head with them, and find that people don't want to play with us anymore. And we have to gradually figure out why that's happening. But if we measure anything that seems progressive to us, it's always because we became aware of something that we didn't know before. Who I am personally, what my needs and talents might be, what I'm doing that is magnetic and brings what I want, what I'm doing that is anti-magnetic, so to speak, and repels what I want. And we have to ask ourselves the question, is there any, because every time we become aware of something we didn't know, by definition we didn't know it until we became aware of it. So there's an obvious question, how much more are we not aware of that we could become aware of? And this is where Yogananda, Swami Kriyananda, Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda, Swami Shivananda, there's many great teachers in our times, and there will always be more. They come and speak from what is a level of infinite awareness. And they give us an idea of our own potential, quite simply. And sometimes we're inspired by that vision, and sometimes we're terrified by it. And because the more we move forward, the more we also leave things behind. And we're comfort-oriented. We're ease and pleasure-oriented. That's the ego's definition of good. A good life is an easy and a pleasurable life. Good karma means I get what I want. Bad karma means I want and I don't get what I want. But what makes it good and what makes it bad? If a parent decides that good means, and I actually unfortunately knew this, I never want to hear my children cry. So whenever they cried, they got what they wanted, and children are not stupid. They figured out what that meant. And the poor parent raised children who were crippled because good and easy was what they were saying. Is that really love? Now, we often talk about God in many ways. I'm very comfortable with that idea. I mean, I can just use that word and I know what I'm talking about. But in actual fact, that word God has, in the Western world, it has no meaning until you go to some church and get them to tell you what it means. So we go to Sanskrit because it has dynamic words that are the synonyms for God. The most dynamic being the word Sat Chit Ananda, which is a triple word. It means ever existing, ever conscious, ever new joy. And when you think like that, wow, that's a nice idea, isn't it? You know, that's something my heart could really respond to. So the masters come and they tell us, you know, that our awareness will continue until we have ever existing, ever conscious, ever new joy. Wow, that's quite a tall order, isn't it? So then we have to figure out, but this is who I am right now and what am I going to do? But the first step is to ask ourselves really deeply, what do I want in life? And why do I want it? Where did it come to me that this was what I wanted? Oh, this is the thought I was going for. You know, one of the messages, when the different masters come to the world, they have the same vision of eternity, the same totally free consciousness. Jesus was the Christ, which meant the anointed one. Yogananda writes that the word Krishna and Christ are actually the same word, you know, which really just conflates everything. And they all have the same perspective, but once they take a physical body, they come to the world in response to the needs of a particular time and often for a particular group, even though the message may universalize later. And they speak to that need, and they're limited by the culture they incarnate in, the consciousness of the planet as a whole, which is sometimes higher and lower. I mean, for example, Jesus being crucified was not a special thing for him. They just basically crucified everybody they didn't like. Yeah, and they crucified them on the public streets. It's like, you know, there was these roadways and they were lined with people being crucified. I mean, wow. It just was what happened. And when they put the Christians to the lions, it was like a soccer game, you know, like a big football stadium full of people enjoying Christians being eaten by lions. So bad as things are, they're better, right? But Jesus had to talk to who he could talk to. And he was actually, you know, interestingly sent to Israel, to the Jewish people, because there was a corrupt priesthood. And he came to correct that corrupt priesthood. And one of the ways it was corrupted was that the concept of God had become a very harsh judge. And there were hundreds of rules. And if you broke any one of them, that was it. And it was not a very warm, fuzzy kind of idea, right? And it didn't give people a lot of space. So Jesus came and he could move it from the judge to the Father. And so then we got at least the impersonal, wisdom-oriented, fair-minded, but nonetheless loving. If you ask of your father a loaf of bread, will he give you a stone? And then we have the story of the prodigal son who completely wastes his inheritance, but then when he repents, the father rejoices. These stories were an attempt to help mankind understand that if even the human Father can forgive, certainly the Divine Father can forgive. Then Yogananda comes in 1920. He comes from India to the Western world and begins to talk. And now, by now, we're solid with the Father, you know. So Yogananda comes and talks to us about the Mother, because we want now to move it one step further. Now here's just an interesting little sneaky bit here, because Jesus knew also, and Jesus did talk about the Mother, but he never called her the Mother. He called her the Comforter. Think about that. Isn't that a gorgeous word? You know, the Comforter. Now, if we were going to make up our own story about what we wanted in life, isn't the Comforter about as close as you can get? Although I keep thinking of this story about a child. A child comes home from Sunday school and says, Mommy, God is going to send us a quilt. And the mother thinks, what? So she calls the Sunday school teacher, and the lesson had been about the Comforter, you know, which is, of course, an English word for quilt, okay? So God's going to send us a quilt. But God is going to send us a Comforter. That's what Jesus said, I'm leaving you, I will send the Comforter. But then Yogananda could come in and just speak of God as Mother. This is not an argument between a patriarch and a matriarchal society. This is the answer to the human heart. When I was 7 years old, my parents sent me to sleepaway camp. And I was the youngest child in the camp, but I was always a rather precocious lass, so I did quite well, even though I was young. But there was an arts and crafts project that involved weaving together these elastic bands, and I guess I just couldn't cope with it. So I never succeeded in making any potholders, whereas all my fellow campers made potholders. Then parents' visiting weekend came, and we had bunk beds like this, and there were little nails, and every child had hung their potholders on their bunk beds so Mommy and Daddy could see what we'd done. I had no potholders. But the girl above me had quite a few. So I took a couple of hers and hung them on mine, like that. I had very good parents, and I was raised very ethically. But when, of course, she saw that I'd taken hers, she was not pleased. And my parents were there. I don't remember all the details, but somehow it all came down, and I was unable to come clean. And I remember just with tears saying to my mommy, they fell, you know, they fell off of her hooks onto mine. You know, little children just say things like that. One of my friends, her little 4-year-old boy came out into the kitchen where Mommy was and said, I didn't do nothing. And she said, honey, where did you do nothing? He said, in the closet. You know, children are so guileless, they don't see. In that case, he had gotten all their vitamins and opened all the jars and poured all the vitamins out. So they were just, you know, that's where he did nothing, in the closet. So I'm telling my mother that they fell. And this is the part of the story. Lying in my family was not acceptable, so there must have been some reckoning later. But my mother looked at me crying, and she understood. You know, how long ago is this? 60, 70 years ago? She just took me in her arms and just, you know, held me. I thank God I had such a mother. But talk about the Comforter. Now, of course, we grow up and we learn to dissemble. We learn to not be so transparently blatant when we're trying to mold reality to what we want it to be. But we never really grow up. We're just children, you know? But the Comforter is always there to first tell us that we are loved, so that we will have the courage to face what we have to do next. I remember I used to procrastinate a great deal. I had a hard time bringing things to a conclusion. It was partly the desire that I was always afraid if I promised to do that, then something else would come up, and it was crazy. And I was doing exactly what I'm doing now, but on a much smaller scale, and only in the US. But I was organizing my own travel. And I kept postponing certain decisions. And a friend of mine, well-meaning, tried to explain to me the catastrophe I was building for myself by not getting my act together, basically. But the more they talked about the catastrophe, the more paralyzed I became. Finally, I got myself together enough to say, I know the problem, but I'm scared. What I need to be is comforted. I need to be told that I can do it. And God bless them, they understood that. And basically started doing that. We always know what to do, but we're often too afraid to do it. So the first issue in our lives is just to find the courage. But you can't find the courage by just looking around or trying to get enough money or enough people to like you or the house paid for. I mean, sure, let's be practical. But in the world that we live in, especially now, because this is a planet where there's a lot of levels of consciousness incarnating at the same time. And this is a transition between a lower and a higher age. And every soul is equally dear to God, which is annoying and comforting both, right? And every mother wants every child to have the chance to learn and grow. And if a human mother can feel that way, a divine mother knows even more. And we get to have an incarnation in which what we don't know, we get to have the opportunity, at least the opportunity to learn what we don't know. The reason it takes so many lifetimes is we don't always learn it fast. And we choose to come to a planet of whatever is the right level of refinement or lack of it, according to what will bring out of us the challenges we need in order to expand our awareness to come to a deeper understanding, which leads us to self-realization. This is all about intuition and the ultimate goal, realization of who we really are, what the self really is. So we live in a world right now where it's a good place to come if you like to destroy things. And it's a good place to come if you're prone to violence. It's a good place to come if you have really no moral standards, And it's a really good place to come if you're attuned to the light and you have the opportunity to be a counter force to all of that shadow. And if we also come here because a lot of those people frighten us. And a lot of the potential of what those people can do frightens us, which is to say, we don't trust God, we don't have confidence in ourselves, and good means easy and pleasurable. And if good means, how much strength do you have within yourself, then we call that bad. So it's a very, very interesting and very positive time to live, and we chose it. We were in the astral world, which is the place we go between these lives, and we had saints and angels to guide us. And we looked around and thought, oh, planet Earth, let's be a grown-up in 2023. And all those shadow people will have nuclear bombs, and we don't know what they're going to do with them. So how do we make ourselves safe? And this is a stage of ever-increasing awareness. And we get to do this for many, many lifetimes. Yogananda said the reason we incarnate so many times is because it almost works. If it was a total catastrophe, we would reject it sooner. But it almost works. You know, the only problem was that I was in Vienna. If I'd only been in San Francisco, it would have been better. So we come back and we try San Francisco, but San Francisco didn't quite work. You know, maybe Acapulco would be better the next time. And we just keep trying. And maybe, you know, we marry this one and you know, he's okay, but his brother was really nice. So the next time I'm going to try for the brother. You know, you just think about it, really. Or we accept our father's insistence that we become a banker when we really wanted to be a singer. You know, it's the next time we get to be a singer. And we just keep trying, and we keep trying. And then gradually we begin to recognize that maybe I'm looking in the wrong way for the wrong thing. And the only unifying factor that I've ever seen in the audiences that I talk to, or the people who come to the temple where I often speak, or the community I live in, is that somehow in all of this we figured out, oh, it's not just, or even primarily, what I pull together in the outside. It's what my consciousness is doing. It's my reaction to my circumstances and who I am on the inside. How much do I love? And how afraid am I? And what am I afraid of? We were in Belgrade, actually this morning. I've been there for, yeah. I've been there, you know, we went through, where were we? We drove out of, I'm going to say it, I keep wanting to say Siberia, but I mean Serbia. We drove out of Serbia through Hungary and then into Austria. You know, I live in the United States. You can go for days and days and never leave the country. You can go across Texas for 3 days, you know. So I love, you know, all that we're doing. But anyway, we were in Belgrade for 9 days. I've never been there before. And just, Ananda has a lovely little center there. This is just a very small thing, but it turns out that like 20 years ago, the woman who actually started that center was feeling very discouraged, and she wrote to Swami Kriyananda. I worked for Swami a lot. I helped him with correspondence. He gave me her letter, and I corresponded with her quite a lot. And apparently whatever I said gave her the courage to continue. And so that center, she stayed, and then it gradually really developed into something. I had totally forgotten that I had anything to do with it. And I find myself in a place I never even thought about going, feeling very much at home and very much a part of it. So I thought, well, look at that, way back here. You know, I actually had a little piece to play. How much do we not know about how this picture is weaving together? I'm sure every one of you has lived long enough to realize that I thought this was supposed to happen or was going to, and then it turned into that. And then you look at it differently. How big is that? How much bigger can that awareness get? So we chose to be here because this is the perfect backdrop for karma. And karma is something I don't yet understand about who I am and my relationship with my Divine Mother. Where do I look for comfort? And what am I afraid of, and why am I afraid of it? You know, every time we see one of these stories knit together, I ask myself, and I have to ask myself this question a lot, why do I ever worry about anything? You know? And I don't have a good answer. I mean, my worries overtake me because my vibration is not yet resolved. But what do I do when my worries overtake me? Do I fall into that world? Or do I ask myself, why do I ever worry about anything? I was in a terrible crisis once with other people's lives, not my own. I was very upset. And as I was weeping, sort of in solitude because it was all so awful, this voice, it wasn't an external voice, but it felt like it came from outside me. It just like went into my ear and it wormed its way through my brain and then went out over here. And it said, can this be happening outside the will of God? And my first response was, oh, phooey, you know? Because I wanted to be upset, I wanted to be afraid, you know? But I thought everything happens for one reason only, which is to show us who we really are, for self-realization. And these are not answers that you can get by reason alone. It's not our intelligence is God-given, but that intelligence has to cooperate with our intuition. Our intuition is the direct knowing. Our intelligence is how we come to understand what to do with that direct knowing. And both of them are essential. But we just know things if we're not afraid to know. You know? In St. John in the Bible, it's really one of the most beautiful phrases. Perfect love casts out all fear. The opposite of fear is love. And I don't mean nice, oh, you awful people, I still love you. No, if they're awful people, just leave their fate to God. You know, we're not big enough. We're not big enough to solve them. But love in our own heart, knowing that if it's not the happy ending, it's not the ending. Because all the masters tell us that this plot has a happy ending, not short term, not lack of suffering, not lack of disappointment, but the opportunity all that gives us to ever increase our awareness until we experience this world as the masters experience it. That's the perfect love, and it's the love of the creation, the creator, the Satchidananda, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss. It's a big project. I find some people are determined that they'll never have another incarnation. They're going to get off the wheel of samsara this time. I personally find that too much pressure. I don't thrive under that kind of pressure. I wilt. So I like reincarnation. Because if I mess it up this time, I'll just get another chance. I literally have all the time in the world to get it straightened out, you know? And the Gita promises, the Bhagavad Gita talks about these things. So does Jesus, but much more obscurely. But the Gita talks about it, and whatever we gain in this lifetime, we begin where we left off the last time. That's just how we go. Everything that we learn, what we possess, dissolves. What we are is eternal. And then you begin to think, well, what treasure do I really want to build? Do I want to build, castles of sand in this world that won't last? Or do I want to build the inner castle, literally, of my own ability to respond courageously, compassionately, and appropriately to whatever comes to me in my life? And then it gets to be so much more fun. Really, it gets to be so much more fun, and it's so much less boring, Because every minute is an opportunity. What am I going to choose? Am I going to choose to get smaller, or am I going to choose to get bigger? Am I going to choose to get more subtle, or am I just going to let the world tell me what to do all the time? When I really made up my mind that the ashram was the life for me, and I just left everything behind and moved to this community that didn't look like anything. It was just really shacks in the woods is basically all we had. And when I was in India visiting there, Ananda has a number of centers there now, and I was in Bangalore and I was meeting people I'd never met before. And I was just telling my own story, and then I met Swami, and then I just sold everything and went to live in the ashram and never looked back. I was 23 at that point, and some of the people there said, "And what did your parents say?" And I said, "First, you have to understand I'm American, but second is I never thought to ask them." Because I knew what I was born to do. And it wasn't that I wanted to defy them. It's just I had to make my life from my own, shall we use the word, intuition. I knew where it came from. But it takes courage. And it takes faith. When I asked Swamiji once, in a very difficult situation, how do you know I use the phrase, what God wants. How do you know what is going to take me upward into greater awareness and not just freeze me as I am, or worse, sink me down into even less? And he said quite simply, to know what is God's will for you in a moment of crisis, you have to practice when it's easier. And that's really, Yogananda put it this way: if you take care of the minutes, he said, incarnations will take care of themselves. This is what I mean about it's so much more entertaining. Because at every significant interchange in your life, you always have a choice. Do I try to get bigger, or do I try to get smaller? And I don't mean you can go from who we are now to Christ-like forgiveness in a moment, but we can just be a little better than our worst. I know that sounds like not much, but trust me, if you just make a habit of being a little better than your worst, you'll be amazed how that attitude gradually changes everything. We have to be authentic, we have to be practical, but we always have to say, is this the best? Can I do just a little more? And in that way, everything becomes different. It's hard for me to explain this because you're meeting me, all of you, for the first time, except for Mark, who knew me when I was a lot younger. Okay? But I just started paying attention. That's all I did. I just started paying attention, and I kept paying attention. And I have, when I first went to the ashram, I worked in the kitchen. I ran the kitchen for a few years, and people would come in and help. And this couple from New York came and spent a couple of weeks and worked with me. And then like 3 or 4 or 5 years later, I went with Swami Kriyananda to New York, and we actually met these people. I think we even stayed in their apartment, if I don't recall perfectly. By that point, I had the name Asha, so the name my mother had given me was gone. When I had known them, I was still using my family name. So I met them in New York, and I said, "Oh, I know you. We knew each other when you came to visit in California." "No," they said, "that was someone else." I said, "Well, I have changed my name, and I did cut my hair, but we were there." "No," they said, "that was someone else." I made them say it 3 times before I said, "Yes, that was someone else." Because why not? All I have done is that I persevered. That's all. I'm always, now that I've been in the community so long and all of us have grown up together, I've had the same friends for 50 years. And I'm friends with the children and even, younger, several generations. And the phrase I use is, I know where all the bodies are buried. And I'm sometimes in a dilemma, like, I know how the people you admire got to be admirable. And I know how they got there. Do I tell you how they got there? Or do I just let you think they were born that way? It really, you can see. But trust me, it's nothing special. It's just the decision that this is the most important thing in the world to me. My own consciousness. I was born to be an instrument of the light. I was born to expand my awareness of the light. I was born to face my fears with the power of the Comforter behind me. People often say, what's the secret of success on the spiritual path? I have it down to 2 English words: don't quit. That's all. Just once you see it, just keep going. And it doesn't matter how often you fail, it really doesn't. The only thing that matters is that we just, after we're tired and have tested whether we can lie down and die, which is really harder to do than you think. Because you lie down to die and then you get hungry. And then you get bored. And then you start thinking about that Netflix series that you haven't seen all of them, And so you get up again. And then you just keep on. But once you're facing in the right direction. Even if you're not moving very much, even if you're just lying on the floor, it doesn't matter. There's a force also that starts comforting you, taking you forward. Well, my friends, what if I invited a few questions?
How can I help my beloved partner who is not yet on this path of self-realization because of fear and of walls that he built up? And I see a lot of potential in him, but he's still afraid. What can I do to help him? Because I'm sure there is a lot of very good energy in him, but I don't manage to get him out of this prison he's in.
Right. The question is, how do I help my partner who's afraid of spiritual life, and how do I get through the wall?
I don't think he's afraid of spiritual life, but he's got some trauma, and so
He has traumas that he...
keeps him from feeling pain also.
The questioner's, I'm doing this for the questioner is correcting it, saying he has pain that he's having a hard time facing, and lots of complexes. When you love someone, especially when you commit yourself as a couple, you take on the karma of the person that you love. And your own karma becomes more complicated because you now are trying to navigate the incarnation of two. Then you start having babies, and you have 3, and you have 4, and you have 5, and you have 6. And it's a whole solar system, that's trying to move together. And everybody's karma, especially the mother or the father, in that situation, is now enormously complicated by the fact that we're all separate individuals with separate destinies. So there is no simple answer to how do I help someone else with their karma, because even though we can be enormously helpful to one another, the desire to change has to be awake in the other person.
I thought it would be your answer.
I know, but I can give you a little more hope than that, but not much. I remember once I was urging a certain action on a certain friend, somehow or another, and they were resisting me. And I was protesting to Swamiji, well, I know what, if they would just do this, it would be better for them. Swami said, of course, I was right. I mean, he started by saying, yes, my perception of that person's issues was very clear, and I knew exactly what would help them. He said, but you have to wait till they're ready. And there's just nothing you can do to make another person ready except pray. And don't ever underestimate the power of prayer. But I'll give you another way to pray, which is very helpful. Okay? We have a superconscious dimension to our awareness. Most of the time we live on the conscious and the subconscious level. Subconscious is everything that's already happened. You speak of trauma. And we just live in the world of everything that's already happened. We define ourselves by it. The superconscious is where new possibilities really exist, where I go in a funnel movement like that because it opens up into infinity, literally. But it requires more energy to go in a new direction than it does just to continue with the momentum we already have. And even if this is miserable, we prefer the known misery to what we imagine to be the greater pain of having to make the effort to change. And no amount of reason will ever shift that. However, the superconscious self knows that sooner or later I'm going to have to do this work. So it's not only that you can pray for the people you love, you can actually pray to the people you love, in the sense of centering yourself at the spiritual lyre and whatever expanded, and then speak telepathically to the superconscious aspect of the person you're trying to help and ask them, how can I help you? What could I do that would actually be of benefit to you? Very interesting things happen when you pray like that. I've actually been sitting face to face with someone, not knowing what was appropriate. I pray to them, just, as we're chatting. I keep asking questions to give myself a little space, but inwardly I'm asking, what do you want from me? How can I help you? 2 things have happened to me, more than once. One is a completely unconsidered idea comes to me, or words come out of my mouth that I've hardly even thought about, and they turn out to be the right thing. Or I'm right on the verge of saying something, it disappears from my consciousness and it never occurs to me again until weeks later. I mean, like it was so wrong that their energy just completely stops me. Now, the problem is the patience, the capacity to withhold your own impatience and desire to force the issue. So it's saint-making for you to have to just trust. Why do I ever worry about anything? And even more difficult is to accept the fact that I don't control someone else's destiny. And no matter how crystal clear it is to me, what is needed doesn't mean it'll ever happen in this incarnation. And so we have to get our strength from inside. And it's heroic. And sometimes it's heartbreaking. But also sometimes it's miraculous. So all of that is true. Okay? Yeah. The prayer that you offer is, Divine Mother, whatever you're trying to teach them, help them to learn it. And then you can add an honest statement, and please don't take very long to do it. But it's a very powerful prayer, because at least then you're praying in the right way. Because whatever it is that you're trying to teach them, help them to learn it, instead of make them different, because then I'll be happier. It's a real prayer for their well-being, and that vibration alone will be helpful. Okay? This is why eventually we turn to God for comfort. Because much as we love each other, there's always something that is difficult, and we just have to turn inside. One more point which is important. Unfortunately, suffering is a tremendous teacher. And there comes a point when the effort to change is less painful than continuing as we are. It's the tipping point. You can't force it, but we all come to it. And through that suffering, we learn lessons that eventually make us free. So when you see people who are suffering, and this is a very important lesson for the times we live in, when you see people who are suffering, and again, you have to have this whole world view or else this doesn't work. If we understand that this is a necessary learning for these people, this person, and they'll never become free until they learn this, and if this is the way they're going to learn it, even if it's painful, why would I not want them to have that experience? And so when we try to prevent people from having hard experiences, we're actually trying to prevent them from learning what they need to learn. And so it takes tremendous strength to be at least calm during that. But why would I not want them to learn? And it shifts the whole, what is compassion? Is it to protect people from the opportunity to grow? Or is it to be courageous while they learn? I've been present on a number of occasions when someone has died, and there's a whole lot of things I can say about death and dying. I mean, in the room when somebody is, and only sometimes is any of that welcome. But I've realized that the presence of a person who comes with my context in the room where someone is dying, when the relatives are there and everything, and the dying person themselves, one person in the room who is not afraid of death, changes the whole room. You don't have to say a word. You just stand there and trust what is happening. So when people are suffering, you can't always alleviate their suffering, But if you're not afraid of their suffering, everything changes because of that. That's the comforter, you see. Yeah. Is that easy? No. That's why there's so few of us. Really, seriously, that's why there's so few. Because this is a very hard path. I never try to convert anyone. This is very challenging. But the rewards are commensurate. Yeah. Okay, another question?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
This is about life purpose or
life purpose.
higher understanding. I have been on a path, especially in my professional life, where I know this is not my purpose, and I know it's time to change. But as you're saying, we can almost be everything we want. We have so many options. We have so many directions to take. But on the other hand, we also have this need for security, for a secure job that, which I am in right now, that gives us financial security to maintain our basic needs and also the ones of our loved ones. So how does this? How can I?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? How
yeah,
can
I know
which direction to go and not be afraid of losing this?
The question is, how do I know my life's purpose, especially if I feel that I'm not quite living up to it? And how do I balance aspiration with practicality? Yogananda said specifically to Swami Kriyananda, you have to be practical in your idealism. You can't just throw yourself off the cliff and hope that God will catch you. You have to balance intuition with intelligence. People talk about heart and mind, but I find it better to say intelligence. Intelligence is an aspect of the divine. So you have to use your intelligence. You can't just use you can't call mere wishful thinking actual divine guidance. So you just have to be balanced. So we start with that. Let me just think how to say this. It matters less what we do, it matters more how we do it. And a lot of times we imagine that the details of our life, that God, or however you feel about that, has a specific opinion about the details of our life. What city do I live in? Things we think of as not small. Where do I live? Who do I marry? Should I have children? And then all these other questions. We think that those details are the story of our life. That's not true. The purpose of our life is to learn to be courageous in the face of difficulty, to overcome fear, and to be able to behave appropriately in all circumstances. I say that rather than just because being nice is not necessarily the way to be. We have to respond, we have to be loyal to truth and have the courage to stand up to it in all circumstances. And often when we don't know what to do, it's because we're asking a question that has no divine answer. So, the kinds of the question like, should I take this job or that job? Should I quit this job or try this? The question is, how can I serve? How can I learn to love more? How can I overcome fear? And when we start asking those questions, then oftentimes things start looking very different. Because sometimes, for one thing, we realize it isn't really my circumstances. It's that I'm not yet facing into what's being asked of me. Another thing that helps bring answers is we need to make the best use of the opportunities that are in front of us. And if we keep thinking, when my circumstances change, then I will do this. But we're not fulfilling the laws of gratitude, and we're not fulfilling the laws of abundance, because we're not making best use of what's given to us. So if also before we start thinking we have to make radical changes, we should start thinking about making small changes. What do I think will happen when I get this new circumstance? What I'm imagining will happen then can I begin to express now? And then when we start moving the energy where we can move it, then often that begins to create the magnetism that allows us to take the next step. So sometimes we just have to realize, I'm not going to get it fixed. I'm just going to start tweaking it around the edges. And usually when we have a big issue of some kind, it also manifests in lots of small ways. And we need to start chewing it on the edges, you know? And if we start chewing it on the edges, then often we develop the talent and the skill that finally allows us to take the big one down. Okay, is that enough to help you get started?
Absolutely.
A very big question. Yeah. And you know, there's a lot of talking about our purpose. And we have a purpose, but it doesn't necessarily look like much. You know, to the outer world. It looks beautiful to the divine, and it looks glorious when we die, but it may never have looked like much when we were here. But when there's a wonderful death and return story about a man who died when he was 21, and he went to Jesus because he loved Jesus. And Jesus just asked him one question: how much have you loved? And he said, well, you know, I'm just a young guy. I haven't had much chance. Jesus wasn't persuaded. Jesus just kept saying, how much have you loved? He didn't just mean be nice. He meant, how much have you really loved? Have you loved people? Have you loved your work? How much have you responded to life itself with love? And, you know, it changed everything. So how much are we loving even right now? And how much are we imagining if we could just change circumstances? Then I would start. Okay. Yeah. Sophie? Yeah.
Can you tell us more about the connection between mother or the comforter and the soul?
The connection between the mother and the soul. The word soul is not a great word because it's a little confusing. The Sanskrit word is jiva, and that means the individual, the everlasting, the continuous individuality that is in all the bodies that makes each of us so different. And I do not know how or why, but somehow or another, when we were all manifested from Satchidananda, we were all ourselves right from the start. Yogananda said he remembers his individual consciousness all the way back to the level of being a diamond. Yeah, I'm just like, I don't know what that means, but he evolved from being a diamond to being a God-realized master. I asked Swami the question, how long did that take? Swami's first response was, that was a dumb question. He meant it was dumb because how would it change my life if I knew how long? Then he said, all time is short compared to eternity. However, what that means is we are the jiva, we are an individual. And that's why we're so different from each other. We all have a unique destiny that we go through. It's quite remarkable. And so the jiva is the spark of individual consciousness, the bubble that gradually merges into the ocean. And we are never, you know, the bubble is always the ocean. The bubble is never actually separate from the ocean, but the bubble becomes convinced that it's just a bubble. You know, a more accurate image is the wave on the sea, because the wave on the sea gets to be really big, and then it goes and smashes against the rock, and it appears to be doing all this terrific stuff. Look how big I am, look how powerful I am, look, I've carved the Grand Canyon, you know? But it's just the ocean. It's never had a separate existence. But what happens is, what ego is, which is a word we use a lot, is when the individual jiva forgets its infinite and identifies with all these temporary conditions. Temporary means the body, the ego, the accomplishments, all of that. And you know, we use the pronoun I. And whenever anybody says I, we tend to say I, like that, you know, and we tap our own chest. This is my I. And we look in the mirror and we see I, like this. But think how we've changed. You know, I'm of an age now, when I cross over about 60, or when I was pushing up towards 60, I'm talking, there's a lot of women in the room, and so you get this. Almost every time I had my hair cut, I went to a different hairdresser. Because because somehow it just wasn't coming out right. And finally I got to the one who told me, honey, everything ages, including your hair. And I thought, oh, it's not the haircut, it's everything else, you know? But just that I mean, and I've been a yogi for decades. The amazing thing to me was that I noticed, and it was even more appalling that I cared. But anyway, I did. Because I had deeply identified with this, and I'd identified even with the youthful this. You know, that's just what we do. So the relation between the divine, the infinite divine, and the jiva is that we are one reality. But we don't realize that. See, that's why that word self-realization is so interesting. Because when you realize something, it was always there, you just hadn't noticed. It's a magnificent word. You don't acquire it, you don't earn it, you don't buy it. It's not conferred on you, it's just, it was always there and we were just unconscious of it. So Divine Mother is our own self, literally. It's just that we have forgotten. So that's why, among other reasons, it's such a magnificent, it's just an image, but it's a true image. It's a way of conceptualizing something that's beyond concept. That there is this conscious force that is always with us, that always loves us, that we are never separated from. But we get confused. Saint Jean Vienna, French saint, if you knew how much God loved you, you would die for joy. You know, just as simple as that. And that's what all the masters affirm. We're never separated, we're never alone, and we're always loved. Just think how happy we would be if we actually really knew that. And this business about Yogananda and the diamond, here's the other thing that's important. Every single stage of awakening that every human being goes through, every master has gone through it. And I just don't mean that they say, oh yeah, poor you, you'll be fine. Every human being was a baby at one point. My beloved nephew was a big man. We were in a restaurant somewhere together, and there was this big family, and they were all cooing over this little darling little baby. You know how you can be one baby and two sets of grandparents and like 8 adults are just watching the baby. And I sort of said, should I take them over and say, this is what's going to happen later? You know? But it's not even just that kind of sympathy. It's that they live through it. They look at us and they say, oh yeah, I remember. And their compassion and kindness to help us is, yeah, I remember when I felt that way, and why don't you try this, it'll help. And just think of what that means. If you can believe and actually then conduct the experiment and discover the truth, that we're always loved and we're never alone. Just think how that would change everything. Okay. Well, our time is running, but is there one more? Yes, I'll take one more.
I'm afraid I have a rather personal question for you. You don't have to answer it, but I was wondering if you ever lost, on your path, if you ever lost trust in the divine plan and was doubting everything, and what you did to overcome your fear or...
The question is, have I ever lost trust in the divine plan? You know, one lives on many different levels simultaneously. So if you ask me, did I ever deeply and truly not believe that there is a divine plan and that divine plan will work out? I never lost faith in that respect. Did I behave as if I'd lost faith? You know, it's because we live on multiple levels at the same time because of the momentum of my past, my subconsciousness, which is all my past karma, that has been habituated to being nervous and has been habituated to just thinking that you know, everybody's takes a different form. Mine often takes the form is there must be something I can do, you know. So I've lived many, many days and weeks, and I dare say months and weeks and long times, many, 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 many times of tension that is completely contrary to what I know to be true, but the force of my past karma is too strong for me to conquer it. So that actually becomes the field of battle. And what that is when I say subconscious, it's not just the way they talk about it psychologically. In this sense, as I was saying, subconscious is everything that you have been up until this point. Okay? And as I was saying earlier, the momentum of that habit. The superconscious is everything that we know we can become. The conscious awareness is the field of battle in which these two forces play. So I guess the actual answer to that is no, I've never actually lost faith, but I have allowed my anxieties to take away my peace, and I have just had to do hand-to-hand combat on the level of the consciousness of why can't I, why am I lying awake at night worrying about this or this or this? Why did I behave in such a inappropriate way because I was so anxious? That all the time. Well, I don't want to exaggerate, but too often. Too often. Much, 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 much less than I used to. But nonetheless, it still sucks me in. There's certain very specific situations in my life right now which will wake me up in the middle of the night and won't let me go back to sleep. But you see, that is the karma, which is why am I worried about this? I know perfectly well that God is in charge. Why am I then not completely relaxed? I don't have a good answer, but I strive strongly. Another way that thing is taken, I had a very difficult situation once I had to work my way through, and I started being really angry. And I finally was sitting actually in the temple where there were big pictures of all these masters. I finally realized I was really mad at them. Really, really mad at them. And the reason I was mad was a little complicated. It was because what they were asking me to face, what life was asking me to face, was going to be so unpleasant and so hard. And I knew that I was going to do it. And I was just mad at, well, I'll put it, this is how Mother Teresa of Calcutta said, God never gives you a challenge greater than He knows your power and He knows you can meet it. He never gives you a challenge greater than you can meet, she said. Sometimes I wish He didn't have so much faith in me. And that's exactly where I realized that that Divine Mother knew this was right for me, and I was so annoyed.
How did it dissolve?
How did it result?
Dissolve. How did the anger dissolve?
The anger dissolved because it was stupid. Because I wanted to grow. I mean, this is the battle of Kurukshetra. I was angry because my prayers were being answered. I'd asked to be able to grow. I was being given the chance to grow, and it was too unpleasant, and I wanted it to be easier. But the sheer irrationality of that's where intelligence comes in. It's just like, how is this working for me? Not very well. And by sheer endurance, not only did I learn a great deal and get bigger, but I also gradually found out that it was exactly the right thing. It's just that I wanted something else, but I'm stupid, Your child says, your little 4-year-old says, Mommy, I'm going to have chocolate cake for breakfast every day. And Mommy says, well, honey, you won't grow up big and strong if you eat chocolate cake for breakfast every day. And the 4-year-old says, yes, I will. And, that's what I realized I was doing. They're saying to me, this is an absolutely necessary karmic cycle you're going to have to go through. I know it's going to be tough. You can do it. You will do it. And then I had to say, well, what do I know? Just because I say I'm going to have chocolate cake and I will get strong, where did that come from? Is it easy? No. It's very hard. And there were lots of days and nights when I was not brave. But the question of, did I ever really think that I was being mistreated by life. No, never. But I sure didn't like it. But you can be very, Yogananda tells us we can be very frank with God, especially with Divine Mother. She likes that. Really. Because you can only speak frankly if you trust. Isn't that so? When you trust that someone loves you, you can be completely yourself. So when you're always trying to put on a good face and say, oh, I'm so happy, everything is perfect. A friend of mine suffered a terrible betrayal in her life, and she was really heartbroken. And so she came to Swami and she said, you know, I think that everybody, you know, the person I was mad at, I really think they just did nothing wrong. And he said, don't comfort yourself with a lie. He said they behaved very badly, that's what happened. He said, you have to comfort yourself by facing the truth. And so we often try to comfort ourselves with a lie. But this is where your intelligence comes in. You know, your heart wants to find easy answers. Your intelligence says, but that's not going to work. If I just take this one and lay another untruth on top of it, and now I have two problems. And that's the perseverance. That, you know, I may feel this way. This is how I think of it in this, again, because you all speak English, this works in English. There are the acts that I commit, and then there are the acts that I am committed to. And there's a lot of acts that I commit, but I'm not committed to them. And that becomes the difference. I watch myself behave badly, and the other part of me waits till she has finished her tantrum, and then we'll pick her up and take her wherever, or her tears, whatever it might be. But I know she'll get tired of crying, and then we'll start over again. So you have to be completely authentic, but you need to practice when it's easier. You need to build into yourself the understanding that I have no choice. I have to live by the truth. Okay, that might be.
I have another question.
Can we stand one more question? I'll answer it quicker. Okay.
Okay, I'll ask you for some advice or idea. What I'm struggling with still is how to bring together the spiritual life and the worldly life. Like when I'm doing my spiritual practice, I lose completely interest in my worldly duties.
I'm going to answer you without your saying any more. How do you bring together the spiritual and the worldly? There's no such thing as the spiritual and the worldly. When are you not working on your consciousness? And if you have duties that are, you know, uncongenial to you, if you have to do them, you don't help yourself by constantly making these distinctions. Every day is the same day. Every minute is the same chance. And sure, every life has lots of stuff we don't like to do. I mean, that's the nature of this planet. We don't like it much. But that's the grist for the mill, is the opportunity. So don't even let that thought go in your mind. Sure, a lot of times things are easier. I like going to Hawaii. Hawaii is really nice. But I don't live there. And it wouldn't be good for me. Whatever God has given to us is our opportunity to grow. Then we can be really annoyed about it. Yeah, I mean, you can be really annoyed about it, but that won't change it. One of my wonderful friends just said the words, and how's that working for you? You know, not very well. Maybe we should think this through. Okay, I think that that's enough for this evening. Thank you all.
And the chorus goes, in my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. Sing with me. In my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. Every morning when I greet the sun, when I move forth through crowded ways, in my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. In my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. When I laugh, oh, and when I cry with pain, when my best friends misunderstand, in my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. In my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. Dear God, my God, I am Thine for eternity. Dear God, my God, I am Thine eternally. Though my path lead me over desert sands, though it take me through bitter storms, in my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. In my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. When I'm working and when in earned repose, let come victory or low defeat, in my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. In my heart, Lord, ever so silently, I will always think of Thee. Dear God, my God, I am Thine for eternity. Dear God, my God, I am Thine eternally. Thank you.